sometimes it's a bit of a leaner concept. So it's leaner, which basically means to offshore or outsource services. You really don't need to have the vendor, which is the one who's providing you that service, need to have a very large infrastructure. If you've sometimes seen some parody of Indian call centers, they'll oftentimes show you that some slum in India, there are like two people sitting on their cell phone while, I don't know, cooking some food, taking your calls. Mainly because the infrastructure requirements in services offshoring or outsourcing is considerably lower. So, services infrastructure is lower than that of goods, which basically means that offshoring services can be quicker but also can be trickier in the process. Now, difficulties in IT outsourcing, not only IT outsourcing, but just about every other type of outsourcing, is the very fact that for the customers, what happens is the one-time capital payment benefits are diluted by long-term, SLA stands for service level agreements, deficits. So what happens is for the customer, which is a client, right, your company that is planning to outsource, you realize that, hey, guess what? I can suddenly sell off my entire division, my entire customer support division, and make loads of money or loads of savings just from not having the real estate, the employees, any of that stuff, and just send it to, I don't know, India, or send it to Vietnam, or send it to Malaysia, or send it to Brazil, or send it to Chile. However, what they forget oftentimes is the fact that while that might give you some initial savings, in the long term, it creates way more problems because controlling the ones who are offering you the service, plus paying them constant service level agreement costs, you have to provide them, you have to pay them from time to time, which basically means that you have a constant flow out and you can't control the quality of the services very well. So the deficits come from loss of control and loss of quality. Plus, you have cost issues. Now, for the vendor, that's the company that is providing you that service, right? That you're purchasing the service from. They have to spend initial amount of capital to build up the infrastructure. So, for example, if you want to produce some goods for somebody, you need to build a factory first. And you need to run that factory. You need to have something called a critical mass, which is the minimum amount of products you need to produce in order to break even. You need access to capital markets. You need some mechanism of financing. If you don't have the right mechanisms of financing, then if you ever need money, there's nowhere for you to go. So you need good banking systems in a place that's setting up your outsourcing contracts. However, if you've been able to get good labor, get a critical mass of customers, your initial infrastructure investment, you can start making money off it from a series of profits that'll come from creating that initial infrastructure. As you get more clients, as the service agreements become longer and longer, you know that they're now locked into your system and you can keep providing them more and more services, more and more goods, and keep on making more and more money. That's exactly what China does, right? And what India does with call centers and back-end software design and development stuff. So, very important to understand. Now, commodity or specialized outsourcing. Some outsourcing is purely commoditized. For example, if somebody just wants a basic type of iron ore, cast iron. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of places you can buy from, which basically means your ability, your bargaining power as a customer is higher because there are many vendors that sell you the same stuff. For example, if you want to go buy milk, and you know that, all right, I typically buy Horizon milk or whatever milk you might buy. You know that just about every single grocery store sells it. So the grocery store in this case is outsourcing, is the one that's the outsourcee. So you could go to any of these grocery stores. However, a specialized outsourcing is maybe you want a specific type of milk that nobody else prepares, but just that company. For example, Starbucks might have a special type of macchiato with Madagascar vanilla bean that nobody else has. That suddenly forces you to only have to go to Starbucks every time you want to get one of those macchiatos with a Madagascar wild vanilla bean, which suddenly creates this very interesting dependence. Suddenly, guess what's happened? The bargaining power of the consumer or the buyer changes based on how commoditized what you're buying is. If you're buying what you're purchasing is a commodity, you can purchase it from anywhere. Your power, more power to you. If what you're purchasing is not available everywhere, but only at certain places, your bargaining power is low and more power to the outsourcee, which basically means they now can control pricing to your disadvantage. So here's a story of a Kosovo center in India. There's a story, a second-hand tale. My friend told me where was visiting some company that was supporting was a Dell call center, and went in and he asked them that, so how many of you know of the product that we're supporting? And everybody said, yes, we do. And is that all right? So in order to provide this product support, have you ever owned this product yourself? And not a single hand went up among a room of possible 100 or 150 people. And so he asked that, so how are you supporting a product that you've never owned? And they said, well, everything is scripted for us. The computer and the engineers that have built the system have created something called a knowledge base. It's called a knowledge base. A knowledge base. It's basically scripted. And they just read of that script, and the person who's hearing them on the other side thinks that they know, but all they're doing is they're going line by line, sequence by sequence, based on what's been designed for them and what's been written for them. That's why the first thing they might ask you is, have you made sure that your system has been charged for at least 16 hours? Because that's what the computer screen says. If the answer is yes, then they click yes and they press another button that will take them to the next screen, where it might say that please press the device on the top right hand corner to turn it on. Does it turn on? Yes or no? And then they go into the next script. So it goes through page by page by page. Right? So, of course, if you look at outsourcing now, you realize there's a technical view of outsourcing, which is, you know what, somebody else will write the script for you. All you have to do is just provide support, just the way that somebody will specify the design of a good or a service. All you have to do is just follow it. Basically like an automaton that doesn't think, just knows how to follow a lead that has been created by somebody smarter than them. The same thing now on the other side. On the business side, it's a bit trickier. Every business manager an executive, especially if their bonuses are scheduled based on how much money they can save the company. They love the idea of outsourcing and offshoring, mainly because by offshoring or outsourcing something, they can simply save a lot of money by first firing a lot of employees in that division and, of course, getting rid of a lot of the real estate. And that becomes a very profitable bit as long as they are getting their performance based bonuses, because this performance is now based on something called savings. And they can always show that as a type of savings. Now, of course, with there's so from a technical side, very scripted, very well defined. You just follow what we're telling you. From a business side, the idea is if you can get rid of all your fixed costs, it's a saving. Based on the savings, I can make a nice bonus, so go ahead with it. Of course, offshore outsourcing has dark sides, right? If you look at clinical trials are the series of um, due diligence examinations that the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, requires medical companies to do prior to sort of what do you call it, getting a product, a medicine out in the market. Because it's more difficult to find patients and try it out on patients, and the costs of doing that is costlier in the Western world. What a lot of these pharmaceuticals do is they basically go to a place like in Africa, or they go to a place in South America or in Asia, and they'll basically bribe the doctors and the hospitals and ask them to try out their medicine in a much more clandestine manner and see how the basic effects are. Because in these economies, in these societies, death sometimes is not too much of a bother. Too many people, too many poor people, let them die, right? So you outsource your clinical trial and let a certain piece of the population die because you realize that, hey, less cost for me, because the cost of somebody dying here would have been much more prohibitive than for somebody dying in some sub-Saharan African country. You see the same thing with asbestos poisoning, with lead-based dumping setups, where if you ever think of every time they're talking about recycling your batteries, picking up your old computer when Best Buy gets you a new computer, where do these old machines go? A computer monitor has loads of chemicals in it, loads of things that oftentimes are even carcinogenic. They basically go into some weird dumping ground in some far corner of the world that you never know, but you suddenly see people out there getting all these really weird diseases. And that is a fact, but that's another type of outsourcing, which is how we also end up outsourcing the end of life items that we have that we don't want. And we don't want to create landfills in a certain economy. But getting back from the dark side of outsourcing to the drivers. So, what are the reasons why you outsource? First is you have access to specialized skills or IT resources. Oftentimes, these are resources that you didn't have, and you didn't have access to these things, but mainly you can still have these specialized skills, but at a lower cost. Second is you avoid building, retaining, and compensating your in house skills. Do you realize every time you bring in labor, every time you're hiring somebody, you have to constantly compensate them. You have to constantly train them. But what happens if you train them and then right after receiving the training, they decide that they're going to go somewhere else? It's a cost for your company because there's no mechanism for you to control the mobility of your employees. They can leave right after they receive training. So what companies say is, I don't want to deal with that headache. Let's just offshore it. Let somebody else deal with that. And lastly, access to special functional capabilities. There are certain things that nobody else wants to do. You always hear about these things from Central American workers coming and, you know, doing all these farm work and all that stuff because a lot of other people don't want to possibly do it. And there's certain truth to that. But that's a functional capability or a functional choice, because of which you also see a lot of outsourcing and offshoring being done in that particular field. So, growth of outsourcing, of course, there's been, as outsourcing has grown, there's also been an issue with the erosion of competitive advantages. So, companies are realizing that if they're outsourcing so much of their work, they're less and less in control of their own destinies. And as they're less in control of their destinies, they're also losing competitive advantages in the market. They're also feeling a sense of losing control and being locked in. So they're locked into a contract. So what happens if you? There was an interesting thing that I was working for one of the companies. There was this company that was creating these bulbs, and everything was working perfectly with these bulbs that were all outsourced except for the filament, which came from a really bad quality vendor. But because of this filament, everything else fell apart. But they were locked into with this contractor or this vendor for a very long time. So even if they wanted to break that contract, they couldn't. So what happened is they ended up losing very large contracts with very large customers because of a bad choice in a vendor, one of the many vendors that they had offshored to. And one of the product pieces was defective. The whole lamp set fell apart. So very important for you to know, how much do you outsource? How much do you control? The key is, if it's mission critical, if it's critical to your competitiveness, you should keep it in-house. If it's not very critical to maintain competitiveness, go ahead and offshore it. But the big thing has always been, let somebody else bear the burden of building things. Your focus is strategy, strategy, strategy. You're the integrator. So what happens is, nowadays a lot of companies will become the integrator rather than the developer, which is they'll have different vendors develop different pieces without knowing how the whole thing fits together. Only you know how the whole things fit together. Therefore, you still have a sense of control. You're not giving away the entire piece of the puzzle. You're the one who's deciding how the integration is going to take place. So here's an interesting thing about how do you decide in terms of should I just purchase things? Should I subscribe things? Every different thing. So should I make? Should I buy? Right. So just like the way we subscribe to Netflix or Amazon Prime, think of it. For Netflix or Amazon Prime, you have an large initial cost. Maybe Netflix had to spend $300 million to build their infrastructure. But after that, they started getting all these clients over time, and the client base keeps growing and growing, and this set ends up offsetting the $300 million that they had to spend in the first place. The other version oftentimes is you start to purchase more and more pieces and then start integrating them and start selling them. So this is your cost and these are your benefits over time, right? So you've got these different types of models. And then, of course, the question is, should you make or should you buy? So buy is a type of outsourcing, make is a sort of internal development. You realize that making costs are oftentimes very high. So all the negative bits are costs and the positive bits are profits. So the question is, your costs, because you have to constantly change machinery, you've got to maintain your own workers, you've got to constantly pay them money. If you're making things in-house, there are certain times when they might become very costly. But how do you ever calculate what the net value is? And the way to calculate the net value is based on, there's a very, very important thing that you'll need all your life for every project. It's called a net present value calculation to understand the costs, the total costs, the total benefits, the total value of a project, whether you decide to outsource it, offshore it, keep it in-house, make, buy, and all those decisions. So let's look at that and let's finish off on that part. So net present value is the answer to whether your project will make or lose you money, right? And the way it's calculated is you look at your net present value is the total cash flow. And the total cash flow is, so the cash flow is basically nothing but benefits minus costs. So you have that year after year after year, right? The next piece of the puzzle is something called a discount rate, which is you do realize money loses value over time, right? And the basic idea behind that is just general inflation. The idea is if you were to not invest in that project but invest it somewhere else, how much would you get as a return? Suppose you said, I'm willing to take the minimal amount of return of 6%, then that should be your discount rate, which is what should be the minimal amount of return that you want out of your projects. Once you have that, then you can set your model up. For example, let's look at a company that's operating over 3 years. First year, they have to spend $200,000 to build the setup. Second, they have to spend $100,000. Second year, you start making maybe $100,000, and then third year, you're making $300,000, right? So how much is the present value of the project? So in order for you to tackle that, all you're doing is you follow the formula, which is what's your initial setup. So year one, you have negative 200k. Year two, you're making $100,000, you're spending $100,000, which is 0k. And year three, you're making 300,000, right? So again, year one, you're setting up the infrastructure, 200,000. So you're just losing that negative 200,000. Year two, you're making 100,000. It's also costing you 100,000, so 0. Year three, you've got 300,000, right? You're making $300,000. So how do you calculate the net present value calculation? So NPV is typically shown as your initial costs, right? Take out your initial costs and look at your future cash flows divided by 1 plus I, and I is the discount rate to the power n, right? So this is basically the sum of all of this. All that means is the sum, right? So this means it's the sum. So let's set this one up. So your first year you lost 200,000, and then the next year, so let's look at it for period 1. Let's look at it at 6% discount rate, which is what would be the minimal rate of return that you would want, your internal rate of return that you would typically like, right? So, hey, that's 0k for year 1. So this is 1 plus 0.06, right? That's 6%, right? So this is 0.6 to the power 1, right? And then for the next year, it's you're making 300,000 divided by 1 plus 0.06 to the power 2. Which basically means once you solve it, you'll see negative 200 plus, this is basically 0, right? Plus, this is 300 divided by 1.06 square, right? And when you calculate that, you'll see it's negative 200 plus 266.999, right? Which basically means you're basically making about positive $66,999 in net present value. So you can set it up as a future sequence of cash flows, period by period. Doesn't have to be by year, could be by months, could be by days, could be by seconds, doesn't really matter. And that's how you calculate that. So let's keep it. So hopefully this was useful, and we'll see how further we go. Alright, enjoy yourselves.